Okie dokie. Were you able to get the reading done for this week?
Yes.
Excellent. Do you have questions on the practice article that you'd like to ask?
I think the only thing I messed up on there was, I knew it was going to be from the reference. And then I guess that you just added like some words on some of them. I think it was like the results. So I don't know if that was something I was missing or if it's, this is a different one.
Oh, okay. Did I give you the full points for it? Did you get 0.5 out of 0.5?
I think on some I did. I think on some I didn't. I don't know if it was just the wording. And I already knew for the DOI, I was gonna probably not get points for that because I was still figuring that out.
You did the deal right.
I was still figuring it out, and I'm like,
I think you got it right, didn't you?
I don't think I did.
You must download. You should download these because what happens if the internet's down? So you left out your ampersand, you've got capital letters where there shouldn't be, and you haven't got capital letters where there should be, but your DOI was fine.
Okay, so that
Because actually, I corrected the DOI, and then when I looked online, you're allowed to have a hyperlink in there now.
yeah, that's what I looked. So I'm
Yeah.
like, hopefully that's okay. If
Yeah.
I'm not.
That's so bizarre to me, but
Yeah.
you know, when you did it, I was like, okay, she's got the manual, I saw it, I know she has it, I know she would have checked this, so, and yeah, I'm surprised that they've done that, to be honest.
Because now the
But-
DOIs are shorter. So like on the other one, it's shorter. so-
Yeah, yeah, I'm really surprised that they went with allowing a hyperlink, but I guess it makes it easy if people are pulling up the document
That's what I
electronically to be able to get to that article, but yeah. No, I have to say, overall, actually, the practice articles were well done. I think this is probably, as a group, this is probably the best set of practice articles I've ever had. So I was very happy.
Yeah, but only one of the procedures where you gave me more feedback, and that made sense. You wanted more what was going on. So I was like, you said how many days and all that. So
Oh yeah.
I did it.
Yeah, remember that you want that procedures has to be a step-by-step what they did. So, and for someone who's looking at a summary, how many days the training program ran and for how long the training program was can be a really important piece of information, because, for example, if they had only done their training program 1 day a week, I would question how much physiological adaptation they would expect to see in 1 day a week, right? So I think that that's pretty key information to put in to a summary. And that's what you're looking for, is like, what are the crucial bits of info? Given that I'm trying to cut this whole article down, what are the really big highlights that I need to include? But no, I thought, as I said, I think overall, as a group, people did well. Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
So they're like, now it makes more sense.
Yay! All right. Okay, so this week I'm going to talk about using peer-reviewed research. What makes research good research to read or to use, and a couple more APA hints to add into the mix, and a little bit of talking about the library leading up for next week's discussion by Karen. Just keeping an eye on the door in case Josie comes. All right, so when you're looking for research, for papers in other classes, or for your purpose statement and your annobibs in this class, as much as possible you want to use peer-reviewed literature. The peer review process is not foolproof at all. You will still find articles that have come out of a peer-reviewed journal where there are errors. And just because it's published and it says it's peer-reviewed doesn't mean that you can't be critical of that work given your own experience. Nothing's perfect, right? And as I said, just because it's published doesn't mean that there aren't any mistakes in there. And often what happens with research articles, some researchers will collect a really large amount of data, and then they will break that data up into chunks so that they get more than one publication out of one data collection. And we talked about that last week, the pressure that researchers are under to publish, so that's a way of kind of helping themselves out with one set of data. But then what will happen is they will create a methodology or something, and maybe a procedures for the first paper, and then they cut and paste into the second paper, and they don't adjust the variables even though they're reporting different variables in the second paper and things like that. So you get kind of copy and paste errors sometimes with these big databases. On the guidelines, when you get there, on the guidelines for the annotated bibliography, I think I have written, I'm pretty sure I made a note that I only want peer-reviewed research used for your annotated bibliographies. If you do find something, a media item, or something that you really would like to use, run it by me first, because otherwise you're going to risk that being crossed out and lose points there. Just generally be very wary of information that you get off the internet, whether it's a coaching article or a blog or something like that, or someone who's giving an opinion, because a lot of those can be misinformed, especially in our area. Not so much possibly, I don't really know anything about the sport administration literature, but I would think there's maybe less chance for error there. But when you're looking at physiology or strength training programs or things like that, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people can put anything they want in a blog. right? They don't have to have it approved, it doesn't, you know, so there's a lot of stuff out there that just is factually incorrect that you need to be careful of. When you are starting to dig into the literature, make sure that you're looking for material that's something that's really interesting for you, right? That's why I'm not kind of dictating your purpose statements and things, because you want to find something that's of interest personally to you. Okay? It should be enjoyable, this literature search. It shouldn't be tedious, it shouldn't be boring, you know, it shouldn't be work. It should be really quite fun to go find things about something you love and that you're interested in. Okay? So, both the textbook and the APA manual, and I did check the 7th edition online, and they have it still included this. They go into a lot of detail about what constitutes peer-reviewed literature and how to decide on whether a journal that you're looking at is good quality. So in my field, in motor behavior, in particular motor development, there are a couple of journals that I would only resort to under duress, right? I would have to really be scraping the barrel to find some information about something to use these particular journals, because although they are technically peer-reviewed, they're not very well done, and it's very easy to get published in them. And so that you just have to be, some of the studies that, often what happens is people will submit their study to journals of higher quality and get refused because it's not a very good study. And so then they'll go to the second tier level journals and they get refused again because it's not really a very good study, and then they resort to these journals and they get published. So, you know, as I said, just because it's peer-reviewed doesn't mean it's top tier and that it's really, really good quality. So the next piece on the slide actually refers to an article from a couple of years ago, which is on concussion testing and return to play. And I can't remember if you guys are going to get that article this semester, so this may be a little heads up for you. But this particular article, I wanted to include this information because, again, it's a peer-reviewed article, it's in a pretty good journal, but there are some issues, in my view, right? This is my opinion as a researcher, so I could, of course, be wrong. Happens quite a lot. But there are two pretty big guffaws in this concussion testing article, in my opinion. One is that they do a pre-post analysis in the statistics, and they report on that pre-post analysis in the results section. But when you go back to the procedures section, they don't tell the reader anything about the post-test. It's not included there, right? So they must have done a post-test because they do a pre-post analysis, right? So that's a pretty sloppy mistake. But as I think I said last week, one of the problems you have, that when it's peer-reviewed, the issue is that reviewers are volunteering their time, right? We don't get paid for being a reviewer for a journal. So a journal will contact a faculty member, you know, typically a faculty member, depending on the area of study. So this person already is busy with teaching, with their own research, you know, with other things we have to do. for the university, and the journal contacts them and says, oh, look, we've got this paper and it's right in your field, would you be a reviewer for the paper? Well, it looks good on your CV to do reviews, so most people will say yes to that. But it does mean that you're squeezing it in amongst everything else, right? And sometimes it's not a priority because it's not something that you're being paid for. So these mistakes do occur. The other problem I had with this particular paper was that the conclusions that were drawn at the end were not founded on the results that were reported. So they start to talk about looking at individuals with epilepsy, but those results weren't given. So again, I think this was probably part of a larger database, and they did some cutting and pasting, and the epilepsy stuff belonged to another paper, but they didn't edit the work very carefully. Okay, so last week when we were going through the template, I said the conclusion statement, you're looking for one sentence that says what the author thinks they found in relation to their primary purpose and the results that are reported, right? So if they start waffling on about other stuff, not that they can't put that there if they talked about it earlier in the paper, like for example last week, the men versus the women, right? So it would be okay for them to discuss the differences between the men and the women, because that was something they did look at, but it wasn't in the primary purpose, so it wouldn't be the conclusion statement that you would look for. Does that make sense? A little bit.
It's supposed to make sense, kind of makes, well, it's supposed to like, whatever the purpose says, pretty much, the conclusion to kind of match.
It should. The conclusion should answer whatever the question was in the purpose. I mean, not actual question mark, but you know, the purpose statement is a question, and that conclusion should be the answer to that question. They should tie together. Okay, so you may or may not have used the library databases yet. If you go to the Golden Student Success Center, so much easier when it was just the Golden Library, webpage, there are periodical databases there. Next week, Karen Nelson will give a lecture and really go into detail into how to access those databases, what kind of search terms to look for. She's set up a page for us specifically for HPE grad students that has a list of the good journals that you could go to first of all, and things like that. So she's got a whole load of very specific information to help you with the library scenario. But the databases are pretty good because you can filter by author. So if you have a paper by someone that you really like and you want to find out if they've done any other research in that area, you can put their name in and search by their name. Or you can go, you know that, for example, for me, Research Quarterly and Exercise and Sport is one of the top journals in our field. So I go there first and check for some search terms. I wouldn't look necessarily for an author, I would go to the journal and hunt in the journal for something, because it's a really good journal. And in these databases, one of the very useful things that several of them do is that they have a little box you can click on to tick to ask the database to only search peer-reviewed journals. So then that saves you the hassle of having to go through the journal and find out whether or not it's peer-reviewed, because your results to your search will automatically be peer-reviewed. So that's really useful, and again, Karen will show you in detail how that works next week. Don't pay for articles, so if you're doing Google searches and things like that for articles, or if you're in the database in the library and you find something and it comes up and says you have to pay for it, don't do that. Don't do that. Because one of the really great things that Easton does for students is it provides an interlibrary loan that can get you almost anything you want. Not quite. Scandinavian journals are very difficult to access for some bizarre reason. Russian journals are quite difficult to access. But most journals, they can, if they don't have it, so you can't access it through a database, they don't have a copy of it in the library, they will go to all the other universities and colleges in New Mexico to see if anybody has it. If they don't have it, they will do a national search and try to get hold of that article or book, chapter, or whatever it is you find that you want. All right, and that very, very time-consuming, expensive job that they do for you is free for you, okay? So you can order as many articles as you want. I would request that you are somewhat frugal with that. You know, once you get, if you enjoy this process of searching databases, it's amazing how many articles you go, oh, I want that, and 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 oh, that sounds really interesting. I want that. So don't just put in an interlibrary loan request for every single article you want to read that you can't find. Please make sure that you order the ones that you really think you might use, okay? Because it is a very expensive process. And as I said, they don't charge you. When I was a grad student at Auburn, which is a Research One institute, I only was allowed to order 4 articles a semester, I think. And if I needed more than 4, I had to pay for them. Okay? So you don't have that limit, but don't abuse it. Okay? One of the things you want to consider if you do find an article that you can't get to that you want to order from Interlibrary Loan is to plan ahead a little bit, particularly if it's an article you need for an assignment with a deadline, because they can often return articles the following day for you. But sometimes it can take 5 or 6 days for them to get something back to you. So if you delay ordering what you want for an assignment, and then you have to email the instructor and say, oh, I need an extension because my article hasn't arrived in time, that's not a very strong reason to request an extension. Right, that's pretty feeble. So, you know, try and stay on top of getting your articles and your reading done ahead of time so that you can meet your assignment deadlines. Okay, so I know there are several of you that are going to be working with the old 6th edition APA manual, because this is not your first semester in the program. So the page numbers that are on the slide are for the 6th edition, okay? I did look up the page numbers for the 7th edition. So APA citations for the 7th edition I don't know the split here, but the page numbers run from 253 to 269. So that's the block of pages that you want to look for citation information. Right? In this class, you won't use citations because you won't be writing a paper, okay? But I want to run through the when and the why you would use them so that you have that information, because my job is to kind of give you a little bit of a leg up on how to use APA for your other classes, all right? So a citation is your opportunity not to get accused of plagiarism, right? So a citation is the thing within the paragraph where you tell the reader that that information wasn't your idea, right? So that is typically, and I have not had chance because I still am waiting for my desk copy of my APA manual. I haven't had chance to look at whether or not they've changed this dramatically, but it didn't come up on the cheat sheet as one of the major changes in the new edition. So I'm hoping this hasn't changed too much. But for example, if you're going to say, let's say, I'm going to stick with my research because that's what I know. Let's say young children indicate cortisol increases to exercise in a similar fashion to adults. Right? So you're looking for this kind of your work, you know, you're interested in small children, you're interested in stress hormone responses, blah, 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 whatever the scenario is. And you want to use that statement in your paper, right? Well, you didn't do that research, okay? So you have to tell the reader where you found this information, but you don't obviously put a reference in the middle of a paper, right? So you put Wall and Rudisill 2005, right? So that tells the reader where this came from, and this, anything you cite in your paper has to be in your reference list, and vice versa. So now the reader can go, ooh, that sounds really interesting, flick to your reference list, find the article, look it up for themselves and read it for themselves. Okay? The other way you can use citations is to say, you could start the sentence off with Wall and Rudisill 2005 stated that blah, 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 blah. Right? Makes sense?
So you're saying I have to cite it, that's the only way to cite it? Like the only way you would want it
Yeah, as far as I know. You can use the quote thing, right? And there's a different format for if you are directly quoting this information from this paper, right? But I would really strongly advise you to get out of the habit of quoting. It's lazy writing to quote. There are occasions when you absolutely have to, like it's a classic. I mean, you can't, bearing in mind we just had Martin Luther King Day, you can't say, I have a dream, and not put it in quotes, right? I mean, it's a classic quote. Everybody knows that he said that. So that, you would quote that. But when you are summarizing information out of a paper, you shouldn't have to quote this kind of information. You should be able to reword that, read it, absorb it, rewrite it in your own words.
Which is like right there where you say, you put their name and then say.
You can say, no, you wouldn't put the citation. You would say, Wall and Rudisill stated that young children indicate cortisol increases to exercise in a similar fashion, right? So you've got, this is the first version, this is the second version.
So they like stated something like that.
Yeah. It's just making sure that you're letting the reader know that this isn't your information. It came from somewhere else. If you don't put the citation in, then this is plagiarism, right? Because you're basically saying, this was my idea. Right?
So when you say stated that, blah, 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 can that be reworded, or do they have to be like cited the way it is?
No, you could just, instead of, so this is reworded, right? Say, this is the exact wording from the paper. So I've already reworded it, but if you're writing a long paper, sometimes you want to change up, because otherwise it's very dull to read. So a lot of the time we use this, but every now and then I'll chuck in one of these just to break up the monotony of how it sounds to me as I'm reading it. It's not a right or a wrong. They're just different ways of making sure you tell the reader where that information came from. And as I said, that paper will be in your reference list, and every single thing in your reference list has to be cited in your paper, right? So that's something to be wary of. Again, if you write a paper and then you reduce it for something, you have to be very careful to realign your reference list with the citations that are in the reduced paper. Right? Now, again, as with the reference list, there are several different ways of doing citations depending on what it is, whether it's a book although there's not as many ways for citations as there are for references. But one thing you have to keep an eye on is how many authors, because the number of authors changes the way that this looks a little bit. And that might be one of the things, let me double check that cheat sheet. I thought that was just references though. Oh, no, they did change this from the 6th. So, the first in-text citation of a work by more than 2 authors may list only the first author followed by et al. So, in the previous editions, if there were only 2 authors on the paper, you had to cite both authors every time. If there were more than 2 authors, I think you had to cite them all the first time, but then you could just put the first one et al. So now they're just saying you can just go et al straight away. But go to the pages in the manual and double check the rules. Okay. That's book references, that's different. Oh, More guidelines have been added that make citing online sources easier and clearer. Yay! That will be nice. That will be useful. Any other questions on this? As I said, you won't need citations, aren't something you will use in this class, but obviously any papers you do for any of your other classes, you'll have to use citations.
Yeah, I just want to know if it's the same one for this edition too, because
Yeah.
last edition was different.
If they let you go Wall et al. Straight away, that's going to make life so much simpler, because you'll never have to worry about it. The problems with citations in the 5th and the 6th editions were that it depended whether it was the first time you cited it or the second time you cited it, whether there were 2 authors or 4 authors or 8 authors. I mean, there were, it was a nightmare. So if they're going to let us just go first name et al. From the get-go, life is going to get way simple. You're not going to have it easy. Easy. All right, the next thing I wanted to highlight for you is regarding punctuation. Again, the page numbers in the slide are for the 6th edition. Punctuation in the 7th edition, the page numbers you're looking for are 153 to 161. Okay. And there are a lot of punctuation rules. And they change every edition. So, 5th edition, which is the one I used for my dissertation, after a period was 1 space. In the 6th edition that we've been using for the past, God knows how many years, way too long, they made us space twice after a period. I'm very happy that in the 7th edition they've gone back to 1 space after a period. So, yeah, that's those of you that are starting on the 7th edition, 1 space after a period. Those of you that are still on the 6th edition, 2 spaces after a period. How the heck I'm going to keep that straight in your papers, I do not know. But we'll deal with that when we get there later in the semester. Okay? Again, I haven't checked the 7th edition for this rule, but it isn't one of the things on my cheat list. So please double check the ruling in the new edition. But this didn't change between the 5th and the 6th, so I doubt if it has changed. If you have a list of things in a sentence, some of you may have learned in English at school that you do not put a comma before the and the last item in the list. But in APA, you do put a comma, right? So if we're going to say the balls were blue, green, yellow, and red. Right? So you want that comma before the and the last item. I doubt if that has changed in the 7th edition, but as I said, I'm still waiting for mine, so I've been looking online, but I haven't seen that one's changed. Okay.
And
There
it's
are...
only for and, right? It's only for and?
You put a comma after everything in the list, but in school, a lot of people are taught that you don't have a comma there before the and.
It's the only one.
But you do for APA. Right? There are a lot of rules for everything. As I said last week, don't even try to learn them. Don't try it. It's a complete waste of your time. You've got better things to be doing. But you've got to be absolutely diligent at checking your APA manual and checking the rules, okay? And it will depend which instructor you are working with as to how fussy they are about how accurate your APA is, right? The only thing I can suggest is just try to be as accurate as possible. Use your manual as much as possible, you know, because you never know when you might want to publish something. That might happen, right? I know some of you are thinking about grad work. It will have to, further grad work, it will have to happen, right? So just start getting into the habit, you know. Oh, if I'm going to go IE blah blah blah, right? Or EG, what's the punctuation for IE and EG? Right? You can't just assume there's no punctuation, because A, you'd be wrong, and B, you'd be lazy, right? So you have to go and check the manual. Because trust me, there's formatting for punctuation around IE and EG, right? Okay? I'm relying on Linda here to tell me whether it's okay to move on to the next item. But those of you that are watching the video on YouTube, obviously if there's something I'm saying here that you have a question about, just please put it into the discussion board or drop me an email so that I can answer that, or make an appointment with me so I can meet with you or Skype with you so that I can answer your questions, okay? Just because you're not here in the classroom doesn't mean you don't have access to answers, all right? Okay, last bit of APA for this week, because there's only so much you can kind of absorb at one time. This is spelling and abbreviation. So again, the page numbers on the slide are for the 6th edition. For spelling, the page numbers you want in the 7th edition are 161 to 164. And for abbreviations, it is 172 to 178. All right. The spelling section will also have the hyphenation rules. So, like I said, there's rules about things you would never imagine, right? So, if I'm saying, if I'm saying peer-reviewed, right? I'm typing peer-reviewed. So, peer-reviewed is not one word. So I have 3 options. I can do that. I can do peer, immediate dash, immediate reviewed. Or I can do peer, space, dash, space, reviewed. Those are the only 3 I can think of, but, right? So, which one is correct? I have no idea is the answer. I would have to use the manual and look it up and find out. Because honestly, that's not a rule I've ever learned because I've done it so many times. Right? So I have no clue. I suspect it's this one, but I don't know. Right? But this is what I mean about checking the manual. Abbreviations. So this section is where you want to go for looking at how do I abbreviate time, units of time. So seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, years, right? Are there abbreviations? Am I meant to write them out in full? If it's abbreviated, is there a space between the number and the unit, or is it immediately after? Is there a period after the abbreviation? Right? I don't know. It's too many rules. You just thumb your APA, you'll have, well actually the new one you're a bit luckier because it's got nice, at least it's got kind of dividers, little coloured dividers on the margin. But, you know, I have stickies all over my APA manual, and I've got things sticking out of the top going, this is where to find such and such, right? That's all you can do, honestly. You just gotta be careful. You gotta be diligent. You've gotta be looking to present something that is as professional as you can make it. Right? This is not undergraduate anymore. It has to be the best, the most professional attempt you can make it. All right? And if you've got a question, or if you're reading the APA manual and you're like, okay, I read it, I still am not sure. Like, or I can't find it in there. Dr. Wall said it was there, and I've been looking for hours and I can't find it. Get in touch with me, right? And I can send you directly to the page that you want to look at. So here's how I work. You ask me something that is in the manual, right? I'm not going to answer the question until you've gone back and looked in the manual again. Okay? Because you have to learn how to use the manual. All right? So if you ask me a question about something that I know is in the manual, I will find and you can't find it, or you are still formatting it incorrectly, I will find the exact page for you that you need to look at in the manual. And I will send you back to the manual. If you're still struggling, once I've done that, come back to me. Right? But I'm not just going to hand out the candy. Okay, you have to learn to be self-sufficient with this stuff. And, you know, if I just answer everything and tell you everything, then that actually isn't helping you very much. All right? Okay, the next couple of slides are really just reviewing the article summary. Do you feel like we need to run through the template one more time? Or just quickly? Just a quick one? Okay. First point. Remember, only 2 lines per row of the box in the template. All right? Some people did not follow that rule. There are 2 reasons for that. The most important reason is that if you follow that rule,